Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Jays Nation, let me be straight with you, because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with fireworks or a headline written in capital letters. Sometimes it slips in quietly, almost shyly, wearing the disguise of a minor move that most people scroll past without blinking. And that's exactly what just happened in Toronto. While everyone else is busy arguing about superstar contracts, moonshot home runs, and which big name should be next on the shopping list, the Blue Jays have done something far more revealing. They signed a 5'7" shortstop. Yes, 5'7". And if that detail made you pause for even half a second, good. Because it should. Here's the uncomfortable idea nobody seems keen to ask out loud. Are the Blue Jays simply patching holes and hoping for the best? Or are they quietly preparing the ground for something much bigger, something that only makes sense once all the pieces are in place? Because small moves, when made deliberately, often tell you more about a team's real intentions than the loud ones ever do. Before we dig any deeper, take a moment to like the video, share it with a fellow Jays fan, and subscribe to the Blue Jays Report. This channel is growing brick by brick, and every new subscriber becomes part of the core group that actually enjoys talking about the details others ignore. This isn't recycled noise. This is community, and it only works if you're part of it. Now let's talk about the move itself, because on paper it looks almost boring. The Toronto Blue Jays signed former Phillies infielder Rafael Lantigua to a minor league deal with an invitation to spring training. Around the same time, they brought back Eloy Jimenez, also on a minor league contract. Two transactions that barely ripple the surface of the news cycle. But when you put them side by side, something starts to take shape. A pattern. And sometimes patterns are where the real story lives. Let's start with Lantigua, because he's the kind of player modern baseball has trained fans to ignore. He's not hyped. He's not young enough to be labeled the future or famous enough to be labeled the savior. He spent all of 2025 in the Phillies system without anyone rushing to put his name in lights. He's short, understated, and has never been treated like a priority by anyone. And yet, that's precisely what makes him interesting. At 27 years old, Lantigua can play second base, third base, shortstop, left field, and even slot in as a designated hitter. He got on base at a .356 clip, drew 77 walks, stole 17 bases, and drove in 56 runs without relying on power. That's not glamour. That's function. That's a Swiss Army knife in a sport obsessed with sledgehammers. And whether Toronto wants to admit it or not, this roster needs that kind of utility far more than it needs another all-or-nothing bat. Take a hard look at the current middle infield situation. On the 40-man roster, you're essentially looking at three reliable names: Andrés Giménez, Ernie Clement, and Leo Jimenez. That's a thin safety net for a season that's supposed to matter. Yes, you can improvise. You can slide someone over, cross your fingers, and hope the baseball gods are kind. But improvisation wins you games in April. It doesn't win you divisions in September. The middle infield is where championship teams stop the bleeding. It's where defensive lapses quietly turn into runs. It's where tired legs in August become mistakes that cost you in October. This is the part of the diamond where you either control the game or slowly lose it. And Lantigua, quietly and without fuss, offers control. Now shift your attention to the other name in this equation, because Eloy Jimenez tells a different story altogether. He's 29, carries a well-documented injury history, and has already tasted what it's like to be written off. But he's also a player with legitimate power, and here's the detail that didn't get enough attention. He lost around 20 pounds this off-season and spent the winter playing in the Dominican Winter League. That's not cosmetic. That's commitment. A player who accepts a minor league deal with a spring training invite isn't looking for comfort. He's looking for survival. He's looking for one more door that hasn't slammed shut. Toronto has always liked this type of gamble because the maths are simple. If it fails, it costs very little. If it works, it reshapes the lineup in ways you didn't plan for. Now comes the part that's slightly uncomfortable, because honesty usually is. These two signings do not solve the Blue Jays' biggest problems. They don't suddenly turn the middle infield into a fortress, and they don't guarantee offensive revival. What they do is buy time. Time to evaluate. Time to negotiate. Time to decide who stays and who moves. And that's where the rumors nobody wants to confront begin to matter. You can't keep quality outfielders sitting around without clear paths to playing time forever. At some point, frustration turns into noise, and noise turns into phone calls. When that phone rings, Toronto needs to be able to answer quickly. You can't trade from strength in one area and leave yourself exposed somewhere else. That's how seasons unravel quietly. This is where Lantigua's value becomes obvious. He doesn't block anyone. He doesn't demand everyday at-bats. He doesn't arrive with expectations or ego. He arrives as insurance, as a cushion, as the piece that allows the front office to make a bigger move without leaving the roster fragile. That kind of flexibility is priceless when injuries hit or when a trade suddenly becomes available. And there's more to it than roster mechanics. Players like Lantigua change late-game dynamics. An eighth-inning walk. A stolen base. A rushed throw. A defensive mistake forced by pressure rather than power. These things don't light up box scores, but they accumulate. They turn into wins over the course of a season. They're the difference between hanging around the playoff picture and controlling it. Let's have a moment of brutal honesty, Jays Nation. Over the past few years, Toronto has leaned too heavily on home runs and not enough on constant pressure. Too much waiting for the big swing, not enough chaos on the base paths. Lantigua represents the opposite philosophy. He's the kind of player pitchers hate facing because nothing feels easy. He stretches at bats, fouls off good pitches, and plays like every game matters, even in May. Now combine that mindset with an Eloy Jimenez trying to prove he still belongs in Major League Baseball, and suddenly the picture sharpens. Toronto is collecting players with something to prove. That is not accidental. Hunger is a resource, and right now the Blue Jays are stockpiling it. Let me pause here and talk plainly. What does Toronto gain from these moves? Cheap depth. Defensive versatility. Competition in spring training. Freedom to trade without panic. What do they lose? No premium prospects. No long-term financial risk. No structural downside. In other words, minimal risk with genuine upside. But here's the catch, and it matters. If the middle infield is the biggest need, it still isn't fully solved. Lantigua helps, but is not the final answer if injuries strike or if the team wants to survive deep into October. Which brings us back to the original question. Is this the final plan, or just the first layer? I lean firmly toward the second. Toronto isn't acting like a desperate team. It's acting like a patient one. A team that knows it still needs one more meaningful piece but refuses to overpay just because the calendar says January. Around the league, the best organizations do this all the time. They build depth early, then use that depth as leverage later. It's like stacking cards, knowing not all of them are meant to be played. Some fans will say Lantigua is irrelevant, that this changes nothing, that the real issues sit elsewhere. And I understand that instinct. Fans crave immediate impact. But smart teams look at structure, durability, and contingency. What kills seasons isn't losing a star. It's not having a functional replacement when something goes wrong. So now I'll turn it back to you. Do you want a team that makes one loud move and leaves itself exposed, or a team that quietly builds depth and chooses the right moment to strike? Because if Lantigua works out, he won't become a star. He'll become necessary. And if he doesn't, Toronto moves on without consequence. I'm Liam, this is the Blue Jays Report, and I bleed blue. Let me know in the comments whether you see this as a simple stopgap or the opening move in a much larger plan. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to stay ahead of what comes next, because the next move might not be nearly as quiet as this one.